Welcome to the Creator Tutorials podcast. Super excited. We got on Milo Shapiro today. Milo, would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Milo Shapiro, and I am a public speaking coach, and I help people to feel more prepared and polished and powerful anytime they have a reason to speak.
So tell me more about that. How did you get into this line of work? What was the story behind how you became a public speaking coach?
It's actually, I'm glad you asked. It's kind of an odd road that I took to get here. As creatives, we often find that the path we set isn't the one we're going to end up being on. So I was an IT guy, if you can believe that, very, very different. And while I was in IT for 15 years or so, I also discovered that I had a real passion for improvisation. I joined improv troops. I traveled around the West Coast and into Canada studying with some of the best. And it was a passion, but who does that for a living? Like 8 people in the country, I thought. So I ended up deciding that I was going to leave, though. I was offered a voluntary separation package, and I thought, could I make this work? And I started a company doing team building events using improv games. And out of the hundreds of improv games I know, I picked out ones that focused on listening skills, building on each other's ideas, creative problem solving. So while we were having fun, people were also going, this is what happens in our staff meeting, or I have a client who pulls this nonsense on me. And that was my business, was just the improv team building. But what happened was people in the classes, which were mostly between 10 and 25 people, started saying to me, this is powerful stuff. You should be more like a motivational speaker. Get the whole audience playing it. And long story short, I ended up meeting some people in the keynote industry who helped me figure out how to turn playing games into a keynote where the audience does play games with me. And my business shifted. It was like 80% speaker, 20% team builder. I thought I was fine with that. What started happening from there was people kept lingering after my speeches and saying, would you work with me on my speaking skills? Would you come in and work with my staff on their speaking skills? First, I said, no, that's not what I do. Yeah, I did years of Toastmasters, and I did years with National Speakers Association now, but training others to do this, that's not what I do. But finally, one person said, I really think you're the person who's supposed to help me. He was selling on QVC, and they were going to cut him for not selling enough. So we watched some of his tapes. I saw some of the things I thought he was doing wrong and talking about his product and presenting to the hostess. And I said, yeah, let's work on those things. And he went back, and instead of not selling enough, he sold out his entire product line in 5 out of his 7 minutes. He had 2 minutes of dead air. They didn't know what to do. And they sold a product he didn't even have with him in Pennsylvania. So I thought, oh, maybe there is something to this. And I added to my website, worked on my SEO, and vroom, now I'm like 70% speaking coach, 20% speaker, 10% team builder. Whichever one the phone rings for, I'm happy about, but I'm mostly finding that people want to improve their skills, and I love seeing them grow. It's terrific to be a part of their personal development to achieve their goals.
Wow, that's a really interesting story there about the QVC guy. And what were some of the things, I think this could be interesting, what were some of the things that he was doing that were like kind of obvious, glaring mistakes that you worked with him to change?
Let's see, we're going back 18 years on that story, but I think I still remember a few of them. One of the things he was doing was he was trying to keep his energy up. So he would build and he would build, but he wasn't coming down from it. So in order to be more interesting, he would build again, and he was looking frenetic and out of control. And the hostess was kind of like, settle down, man. But he didn't want to look like he was not interesting. So I taught him a technique that I made up called the build and drop. So he was selling plants. He was actually selling like stalks of plants. You put them in the dirt and they send roots one way and plants the other way, leaves the other way. But it was the stalks. His brothers were finding the stalks around the world. He was selling the stalks. And so I said, what we want to do is get excited, but remember that in the long run, the garden experience should be calm and relaxing and feel good when you see it. So you're going to get it in the mail. You're going to take it out of the package. You're going to get out in the yard. You're going to put it in the dirt. And before you know it, leaves are starting to shoot out. And you can't see the roots, but the leaves are growing. So what we did, we built and we dropped. And it gave them a chance to be peaceful again and then build again about how your neighbors are going to come around. They're going to be commenting before you know it. Yours is the house that everyone wants to hang out. Build and drop. So I remember that we taught him that technique. There was also some stuff around his vocabulary. It sounded a little bit like he was talking down to the audience. So I showed him how to use more 1- and 2-syllable words and keep things more 5th grade level. So he was a little more relatable. It's been a long time. I'm sure there was a couple other things, but I don't remember what now.
No, I mean, those are really, really interesting. I like the idea because on social media, I'm like, usually it's up and up and up and up. And then I like this idea of kind of up and then you got to bring it down and relating the tonality to the product you're selling. So talk to me more about that, about tonality an advanced tonality and how we use tonality in what we're saying and what that communicates, because it's something that not a lot of people think about.
Right. And we're so used to constantly banging out texts and emails that we don't usually think about writing for what we're going to say. So that's in a situation where we have the opportunity to write for what we're going to say, which is different than this situation. QVC, he didn't know quite what questions she was going to ask. That's another thing we worked on, is how to answer the question you want to ask despite what question was asked of you. We see this in political debates all the time, and it's really annoying there. But if you actually answer her question, but take it then in a direction that's going to lead to stuff, she's not a plant expert. So I showed him how to guide questions to what he needed to talk about, that the audience at home was going to go, oh, and pick up the phone or get on QVC.com and there probably wasn't a QVC.com then, to be able to order that way. So that's that. To come back to your question about tonality, most of us are not taught to write for how we speak. We're taught to write to impress our fourth grade teacher. And that means getting more formal. And then we go out and try and say it, and we sound like a textbook, and no one relates to that. So one of the things I do, and some of my clients are kind of shocked by it first, is I say, I want you to change that to gimme, gotta, have to, type HAFTA right there. I want you to start that sentence with the word and. I don't care what you were taught, because when we speak, we do that all the time. And if I just did it. I started that sentence with and. It followed a pause, so it worked. And so I show people how to sound more like themselves. One of the compliments I get on my book, Public Speaking, Get A's, Not Z's, is that I've had people say to me, it sounded like you were reading it in my head. I could hear your voice saying these things, even people who didn't know me, rather than it seeming like just the perfect sentence structure, because I want them to hear it like they might say it. And that's one of my challenges as a speaking coach, is I don't want you to sound like me. I don't want you to sound like whoever you loved on a TED Talk last week. It's got to sound like the best Alex can sound like, and still sound like Alex. So while there might be some guidance in how Alex should speak, if Alex was my client, in the end, I might have you say something and I'll go, that sounded like me. How would you say that? Yeah, that sounds. So there's give and take in coaching, because coaching is a two-way process. It's not just like turning your text over to a copywriting company and say, please come up with a slogan for us and we're going to put that right on our website. It's developing that relationship so that you grow, and I'm a part of helping that happen. Back to sentence structure and how to use tonality. One of the things we run into is we're so used to writing. I know a therapist who says about half of her appointments, her couples appointments, are started from somebody sent someone an email or someone sent somebody a text, and the appointments start with, that's not how I meant that. Well, that's how it sounded in the text. It's because we don't know how to write so that we get that tonality across. So there's two ways of fixing it. One is to figure out how do we write it so that if the person's literally reading it, that they're going to hear it how you intend it. But more, if it's for speaking, and again, I'm a speaking coach, it's how do I write that in such a way that I get the message across the way I want it. And sometimes it's as simple as which word you put the emphasis on. If I say something like, if in a text, if I write, we love this program, that's just a sentence. But we love this program is very different than we love this program, which is totally different. We love this program, which makes it sound like compared to a different one. So one is about who, one is about how we feel, one is about a direction. I don't know if program would work. But figuring out what to emphasize. I mean, there are times I just tell the person, I want you to emphasize the word is in that sentence. And they go, oh my gosh, that really changed it. Yes, that's what I was looking for. And they do learn in working with me how to do it better themselves. It's not like it's all about I show them and then they're needy on me. So they need to be able to develop those skills. I just worked with someone for a national sales meeting, and we developed this whole comparing NASA to their sales team and what was going on in 1969 with the space shuttle, the Apollo taking off, and how what they went through was similar to what this company was trying to do. And it was great. Next year when I work with her again, I still will be helpful to her, but we'll probably do half as many appointments, because Courtney is now a way better speaker for having worked with me. Now it'll just be how do we put together that speech, because it's got to be about their personal growth, not just dependency on me. I have been told many times that they don't know. People said, I have never seen anyone who uses italics and bold and capital letters and smiley faces as much as you do in your emails, Milo. I'm like, but do you hear my tone of voice when I do that? So let's go back to that example I used a moment ago, like we love this program. I would put this in
Mm-hmm.
italics and bold so the person reading it would see we love this program. It makes them hear that, almost a pitch up in my voice. And I teach people because people don't know how to rehearse for speaking. One of the things I teach them is if they have a script, how to use the system that I have, italics being one of them. Italics is what I use when I want the person to go up with their pitch on the voice. So it's not about having to say this sentence up here because that doesn't sound any better, but the difference between we love this program, just a word. And so italics will do that. So we can do that in our writing. We can do it in social media in places that allow us to do something other than, unfortunately, a lot of the times we were stuck, we can't italicize or bold, but we can use capitals. Now, do we want to have the whole thing about not shouting? Of course, but don't do whole sentences. Do a word here and there to show emphasis. So that's something you can do with copy. If you're making video for it, then your tonality has to match what's going on. If you're talking about NASCAR, you don't want to be doing it in a soft and loving tone because NASCAR is about excitement and fun and passion. But if you're talking about inner peace and what you're trying to do with that, then talking like NASCAR doesn't make sense. One of the questions I often ask people in our initial consultation is, tell me a few speakers that you really like, that you admire. And I figure out, are they good role models for them? There was one woman who said, well, I guess if I could speak like anyone, it would be Martin Luther King. He's the best ever. And I went, I'm not going to say anything bad about him as a speaker, but he was a preacher. It's completely inappropriate for what you're talking about. It was perfect for him. Not a criticism of Martin Luther King as a speaker, one of the best ever, but not a good role model for her. So I had to point her towards people who spoke about things that were gentle and internal and loving, because that was more close to her message. And she saw, oh, that can look just as professional. I think she felt if she went there, she'd look weak or ineffective or too gentle. I'm like, not if you do it in a really, really good way. So are you using your voice, your face, and a body in a way that conveys that message beautifully so that a soft message still hits home?
Yeah, talk to me about storytelling. This is kind of the big thing on social media.
Yeah.
Everyone says you want to do well on social media, tell a story. How can we tell better stories from your perspective?
First, to start by doing it. How many people aren't doing it? A great example, I had a client who was doing a whole program on saving the whales. No one doesn't think not many people wouldn't think that wasn't a good thing. But I listened to his initial presentation. I said, I'm not moved by it. I'll call him Steve, wasn't his name. And he said, but this is big things we're doing. I said, I know it's big things. And I'm glad you're doing it, but you're giving me a data dump of what you've done. Tell me about a whale that your organization was involved in saving. Tell me about the people who were there, how long it took, where there was a struggle, how everybody pitched in, how they were able to do it, the big cheers when he sped away finally when he was in deep enough water. He said, but that's only one whale. We're doing thousands. I said, I will be moved by that story. And then we end with, in 2014, we did that 2,587 times, our record year. That story, that many times. He said, but it's still only telling them about one. I'm like, they will do the math in their heads once I can relate to that. And he did it, and he came back with 2 pieces of feedback. He said, first, it's the best we've ever come across. Our audience was in tears, and we raised more money than ever. I said, and the second thing goes, I still don't understand why it works. It doesn't work for me. I said, then you need to get over that it has to work for you if you're being more effective. And that can be hard. People don't want to seem phony. But he did tell that story well by the time we crafted it that way. He said, I just have to acknowledge that most people aren't like me. And I said, yeah, that's just a lesson for you to have. Most people get closer and closer to their material as it becomes more to the heart and more effective with that. I talk in my coaching about a 4-step process, and it's more than we can delve into here, but capturing their attention at the beginning is part of that. The problem is a lot of people say, oh, I've got a great story, and then they are jumping through hoops to connect it to what they have to say. There wasn't any reason to tell that story. So we need to think, what is the goal? What is it we want to accomplish with our opening story, if we're opening with one? And then think, what is a story that makes that point? It needs to go in that direction, especially if it isn't obvious when you're telling the story how it connects to the topic of the day. And that can be okay. I love when I'm sitting there going, where is she going with this? Oh, that's how that ties into what we were here. That's kind of cool. It doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes it's very obvious how it does. But don't start with that. Maybe a great example of that is there was a woman who was my client, and her story was all about the fact that she suffers from multiple personality disorder, which goes by a different name. I think it's DID, or I think it's DID. But she was starting with her young childhood and everything that built up to it. And I said to her, "You can't. Your early childhood isn't interesting." She said, "But that's my story." I said, "That's why we have to grab their attention at the beginning with a piece of your later story and then say, how did that end up happening? Well, it started with my youth. I will listen to your youth once you've intrigued me about the fact that something big is coming." And we came up with a really interesting opening where she acted like someone who was seeing 12 different personalities coming. And then she stopped and she smiled at the audience and said, "Is that what you think of when you think of someone with multiple personality disorder?" Well, that might be what you're imagining, but it doesn't have to be that way. And you actually know someone who has this because it's me. And I'm going to tell you how that's played out in my life and how it came to be. Well, at that point, everyone was going to listen to her early childhood to find out how she ended up with the voices in her head that protected her. That was the reason. It was a protection device for her to deal with her childhood. So that uses a technique that I call telling a story inside out. Stephen King is brilliant at this. If you've ever read any of his novels, it doesn't give you the background first. Page one will have someone being lowered toward a fire while their foot is tied to a rope, and she could feel her hair stand like, who is she? What's going on? Who's lowering her into a fire? And that chapter will be like 3 pages long. And page 4, it'll be, it's a beautiful day in Maine. And they put out wait a minute, who are these people in Maine? I wonder about the guy in the fire, the woman in the fire. Well, you're going to find her again on page 150. But now that I'm intrigued because he told it slightly inside out, I'm brought in. And this may sound like it's a Stephen King kind of thing, but I do this all the time with people with their business presentations. We need to intrigue somebody before we can get to the details, or they won't care. Another simple little thing is, especially when people have very short presentations, you probably talk to people who have that 30-second pitch they get. They're maybe in a networking group. Don't start with your name. Nobody cares who you are until they're interested in you. And then at the end, what ends up happening, they go, oh, shoot, what was his name again? I don't have time to repeat that. Grab their attention right away with something like, I'll choose a profession, cat products. Does your cat sometimes look at you like he doesn't think you have any idea what he wants to do, and he just looks bored? I'm just improvising now. But if I end with, I'm Milo and my cat toys have been known to do da 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 da, then people might remember Milo is the guy with the cat toys.
Amazing tips there. And that's what we talk about on social media is like, especially with short form vertical video, you have to capture their attention in those first couple of seconds. And if you don't, they're gone. So if you start with, hey, my name is, who cares? Like we used to do storytelling beginning, middle, and end, but now it's like climax first and then kind of reverse engineer the process. And leave us with one more tip on how we can improve our public speaking.
Probably the first words that I hear when I get that phone call are along the lines of words like fear, scared, terrified, nervous, anxiety, those kinds of words. Mm-hmm. And they want to know, can I help them not be scared of speaking? And sometimes people have said, I thought about calling a hypnotist to try and help get me over the fear of speaking. So here's my theory on that. I don't think it's really appropriate or maybe even necessarily ethical to help people to get over the fear of giving bad presentations. There's a reason you're scared, and it's probably because if you had a public education or in many cases even a private education, no one ever taught you how to do this. That wasn't testable. That didn't pay off for your state if you could speak effectively. But if you could take a standardized test, terrific. Very few of us have had this. So we're learning by watching other people, trying to emulate them. And here's what happens. We try it. It doesn't go very well. We sense that it doesn't go very well. Maybe we get feedback that didn't go very well. That makes us nervous to come back and try it again. Because we get that message in our head, see, I'm not good at this. Oh no, since I'm not good at this, I'm going to screw it up again. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. So what we do is we try and break that cycle by saying, forget about getting over the fear initially. Let's work on making you good. Let's work on helping you be a better storyteller, balance stories and data better, use your face, your body, and your voice more effectively, create story through, not just story, but data through lines that keep people pulling in. So as you said the time flew by. That's what I want anytime any of my clients are speaking, so that has that opportunity to make people go, that went well. I got good feedback. I felt good about that. And when you start to think you feel good, the nerves go away. And it happens time and again that I've seen people get better, feel better, and they end up saying, This doesn't scare me anymore because you know what you're doing. If I had to do open heart surgery today, I'd be terrified. I do not have a phobia of open heart surgery. There's no phobia of that. It just, I'm not trained to do it. And that's where the so-called phobia of public speaking comes from, because people weren't shown how to do it well in their lives, and yet they're expected to do it. Of course, that's scary.
Wow.
One more thing is in social media, a lot of times it's just us talking into the camera and trying to do this without looking at notes. And that's a very unnatural setting too. So I have a program, I call it Business Advantage, businessadvantage.xyz, where I interview the person. And it takes so much of the stress out of it, because now it's like you're a guest on Oprah. You're a guest on a show. We work out the questions in advance. You don't need the notes. You know your business. But with me taking care of making sure I know what the next question is, and we've practiced this a couple of times, and the last time we just hit record and do it again. And people say, oh my gosh, I have put off creating video for years, and now in 8 minutes, this is ready to go and far more interesting than anything I would have done. So that's another opportunity there. Interviews are inherently more interesting than any one person talking.
Just totally connected and agree with what you said about the public speaking and the fear around it. The same thing for social media. People expect they're going to be professionals the first time they get on it, and it's something like anything in life. You gotta practice, right? You gotta do it. You gotta totally connect with that. And I want people to notice too, you're a very talented speaker in this presentation, how many tonality changes, the pacing, the presentation. I mean, people should really study this, because you've just in your speech, I think, demonstrate a lot of the things that you teach. So really appreciate you being on. It was great. Loved having you here. We'll have to have you back on. Milo, how can people reach out to you, connect with you, and find you?
Sure. The best way to find me is to go right to the website and the contact page there, but you can learn a little bit more about me and other things. I have information out there. Publicdynamics.com, PUBLICDYNAMICS.com.
Very good. Great. Well, we'll put that link below this video just to make it a little bit easier for you. And like I said, I really appreciate you being on the show today. We'll have to have you back. And thank you.
It's been great. Thanks.